Do you know what UEFA is cooking up now that they have Gianni Infantino cornered? It is something completely unprecedented in the history of European soccer. It is a decision that directly impacts Argentine players based in Europe, a move with a hidden motive that UEFA refuses to share publicly, but you are about to find out right now. Some soccer wars are won with loud press releases, others are won with moves that absolutely nobody saw coming. This week UEFA chose the second path. Stay tuned because what is coming in the next few hours directly drags in Argentina, the World Cup, and Gianni Infantino in a way the sport has never seen. Infantino honestly believed that just pulling the plan would be enough. On August 1st, the FIFA president put out a statement confirming that FIFA Forward Enterprise was officially dead, that the project aiming to sell 20 to 30% of the World Cup rights to private investors was cancelled, and that after listening to everyone, he realized the bitter division the plan created simply made it impossible to move forward. Infantino spun it as a mature call, the move of a leader who listens, who dialogues, and who backs down when wrong. But what he conveniently left out of that statement is that he did not back down out of conviction. He did it because he was trapped. Because UEFA, backed by its 55 national federations, voted on July 30th to boycott all FIFA tournaments if the plan remained active. Because CONCACAF joined the rebellion, even the Asian Confederation closed ranks against him. And because his own top advisor, Carlos Cordero, former director at Goldman Sachs, resigned in protest. Infantino did not scrap the plan because he suddenly realized it was a massive mistake. He killed it because he was entirely alone. And when the president of FIFA is isolated, the soccer world senses it, and sharks start to circle. UEFA was the very first to react to his statement, and their response was not what Infantino wanted to hear when he hit send. It was not a warm congratulatory call. There was no statement of support. Instead, they decided to completely turn the screws on him. UEFA celebrated the death of the project, but in that very same public release, they added a line that sent shivers through FIFA. They wanted to hold those responsible accountable. That single phrase changes everything, because UEFA has been at war with Infantino for weeks. They do not just want the plan dead, they want blood. They want real consequences for the people who pushed global soccer to this chaotic breaking point. The crisis sparked by FIFA Forward Enterprise will not simply fade away with a polite apology and a step backward. It requires something far more definitive, and the man UEFA holds solely responsible for this entire mess has a name: Gianni Infantino. To understand why UEFA has been waiting to strike for months, you have to look back at the 2026 World Cup, because this bitter feud between UEFA and Infantino did not start with some financial proposal. It started earlier, during 6 weeks of that tournament, where UEFA witnessed things they simply could not ignore. They kept quiet and private, waiting for the perfect moment to strike publicly. First, there was blatant favoritism. During the 2026 tournament, Argentina received special treatment that left European federations watching with a slowly burning, intense anger that grew with every match. Dubious calls constantly swung Argentina's way at critical moments. Phantom fouls called, obvious offsides completely ignored, red cards shown right when opponents pressed. On their own, these could be written off as simple human error. But together, they formed a chilling pattern that UEFA quietly documented before demanding answers. FIFA hid behind the classic bureaucratic language of global agencies that have no intention of actually answering, using empty corporate speak and pointing to standard review protocols, promising that everything would be analyzed internally. But nothing changed. And then came the second problem, a scandal so massive, UEFA could no longer keep it behind closed doors. After the final whistle, UEFA formally requested the audio and video recordings of the VAR from the most controversial matches of the tournament. It was a standard request that any confederation has the right to make, requiring FIFA to act transparently if they wanted to protect the credibility of the VR system they spent years promoting as the ultimate guarantee of fairness. When FIFA's reply finally landed weeks later, the explanation was so shocking it left UEFA officials completely speechless. The VR audio and video files were gone. Deleted. FIFA claimed a routine server cleanup to free up space had wiped out the exact footage recorded during those key matches. The evidence UEFA demanded simply did not exist anymore. That there was simply nothing to hand over, because nothing had been kept. UEFA, having received that excuse, flat out rejected it. Deleting VAR records from a World Cup is hardly some routine way to free up hard drive space. In fact, it is the exact opposite of what any responsible organization would do with the most crucial footage they have generated in the last 4 years. That video and audio are the definitive proof that the system actually works. They are the shield FIFA hides behind whenever anyone questions a refereeing decision. They are the only real way to know what went down on the pitch. Was it just a bad call, or something far worse? And yet they just vanished. UEFA could only read that response one way, as a deliberate, calculated obstruction. It was confirmation that those videos held something someone desperately wanted to keep hidden from UEFA. It was the most concrete proof yet that the 2026 World Cup was riddled with irregularities. Things FIFA did not just ignore, but actively tried to make impossible to investigate. That became the second major strike UEFA quietly filed away against Infantino. The third strike came right after the semi-final between Argentina and England, when the Argentine players unfurled a banner on the pitch at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, claiming the Malvinas belonged to Argentina. They did it right in front of the English fans still lingering in the stands, in the very stadium where, just hours earlier, security had strictly banned any mention of the island conflict. The English Premier League clubs erupted with a fury that quickly spilled over from the pitch and straight into international politics. They demanded that FIFA punish the Argentine players involved. They demanded real, concrete action, proving that the rules banning political messages inside stadiums apply to everyone in the exact same way. It should not matter what the FIFA president personally thought about who won that World Cup. But FIFA did absolutely nothing. Having received zero real response, the furious English clubs took their complaint straight to UEFA. They warned that if UEFA refused to act, they would seriously reconsider their own participation in future European tournaments. There was no way they could keep playing in the Champions League as usual. Not while FIFA ignored the Atlanta incident, and certainly not while Infantino remained in charge as if none of his actions had any real consequences. UEFA already had those first two major grievances filed away. Now they had a third from the English clubs and decided it was time to move. What they are drawing up behind closed doors right now builds directly on those grievances. And the massive announcement they are preparing is something Argentine football has absolutely no precedent for handling. But there is one crucial piece of the puzzle to explain before we get to that looming announcement. Right now, UEFA holds an incredible amount of leverage over Infantino, leverage they never had before. Ever since he took the FIFA presidency back in 2016, he built his entire authority on one very specific foundation. That foundation is the loyalty of smaller federations. Nations without Europe's massive sporting power, but whose votes in the FIFA Congress carry the exact same weight as giants like Germany or Spain. This loyal bloc is what allowed him to survive years of relentless UEFA criticism. Even though Europe won most World Cups, the combined votes from Africa, Asia, CONCACAF, and Oceania handed him a majority that UEFA simply could not break on its own. But everything shifted this week. CONCACAF joined the revolt against the FIFA Forward initiative, and Asia did too. Once those two massive confederations turned, Infantino lost the majority that kept him safe. Suddenly, he was left without the protective shield that kept him safe from the fallout of his actions during the World Cup. UEFA knows it, and their next move, planned for the coming hours, strikes directly at that weakness, capitalizing on a moment where Infantino finds himself more isolated than ever before. Any desperate defensive move he tries to make now will have less backing than at any other point in his entire presidency. UEFA timed this perfectly, knowing that if they strike now, Infantino has absolutely no way to fight back. Armed with that exact certainty, UEFA is preparing to unleash a move that will shake the football world to its core. The announcement UEFA is preparing to drop in the coming hours comes in one very specific form: a total ban. Under this rule, absolutely no Argentine player carrying an Argentine passport can participate in any UEFA-organized tournament, as long as Infantino remains the president of FIFA, and as long as the organization refuses to address the three deep-seated scandals UEFA documented during and after the 2026 World Cup: the Champions League, the Europa League, the Conference League. Every single European tournament will be completely closed to Argentine players until real change happens at FIFA. That is the nuclear option UEFA is holding, and once it is officially announced, the football world will have to grapple in real time with what this means for Europe's elite clubs. Because the Argentine players currently starring in those European leagues are absolutely not minor bench warmers. They are crucial starters, they are superstars. These are elite players whose clubs paid absolute fortunes for them, precisely because they are among the very best in the world at what they do. Mac Allister at Liverpool, Lisandro Martínez representing Manchester United, Dibu Martinez over at Aston Villa, and Cristian Romero at Tottenham. Over in Spain, Paredes at whichever club signed him. De Paul wherever he lands. And in Madrid, a city that shares so many deep historical connections with Argentina, who just landed at Fulham after that transfer deal La Liga is investigating, is going to be blocked from European football if this ban stands. A 16-year-old kid who just arrived, and who is completely innocent of anything that happened at that World Cup, now suddenly trapped in a bitter war between UEFA and FIFA that no one warned him about when he signed. UEFA knows perfectly well that this controversial decision is going to trigger massive backlash across the board. The targeted clubs are going to fight back. The players will too. Football associations in every country with Argentinian players on their rosters will demand immediate answers. The media will spend weeks debating whether UEFA is being fair or simply using these players as political hostages in a war they did not start. But UEFA already has an answer ready. They claim Argentine players are not the target here. Nobody at UEFA wants to damage the careers of Mac Allister, Lisandro, or any of the others. This harsh ban hits them not because of a UEFA vendetta, but because of FIFA, a governing body that should have protected these players by making the right calls during the World Cup, yet chose not to. The blame does not belong to the players. It belongs entirely to Infantino. That is precisely the message UEFA wants to send. When the world looks at this ban, they want everyone to see just one man responsible for this entire disaster. Blamed for the blatant favoritism, the deleted VAR footage, and the unpunished display of that controversial Malvinas flag, leaving furious English clubs without a response while driving the FIFA forward enterprise. He pushed the sport into its deepest crisis in decades, all because of one man, Gianni Infantino. And the Argentinian players themselves, when they finally hear about this devastating ban, they will know exactly who to blame. These guys understand the dark side of the game. They saw firsthand what went down during that chaotic World Cup, living inside the locker room, feeling the tension of a tournament where bizarre, arbitrary decisions became the norm, and where Argentina's wild post-match celebrations sparked massive drama that the FIFA president completely failed to handle. Players like Mac Allister, who took a massive amount of heat for displaying that controversial Malvinas flag, knows exactly that the wild scenes in Atlanta had heavy consequences that Infantino refused to face. If anyone needed to apologize or handle the mess with some common sense, it was not the player. It was the man leading the most powerful football institution, now Dibu Martinez, who played through the crushing pressure of a world watching Argentina with a mix of awe and deep distrust, also knows exactly whose backroom decisions fueled those dark suspicions. And Cristian Romero, Lisandro, and all the rest. The second this ban hits their phones, their immediate fury is going to morph into something much more dangerous, direct pressure on the AFA. Because if Argentina's elite stars are banned from the Champions League, the Argentinian Football Association faces a crisis infinitely more damaging than any standard disciplinary fine FIFA could ever throw their way. Put simply, their best players will be completely shut out of the biggest club tournament on earth. Elite European clubs will lose their key starters. Meanwhile, millions of passionate fans will watch their heroes' careers get frozen by a political war between greedy soccer giants. And the AFA, which still holds massive leverage inside FIFA, because Argentina is an absolute titan in global soccer, is going to weaponize that massive power to squeeze Gianni Infantino, not to protect his job, but to force him out. Having witnessed the madness inside the World Cup firsthand, they know Infantino's position is completely dead in the water. The embattled FIFA president has picked far too many fights all at once, and his political support completely crumbled this week when CONCACAF and Asia joined Europe's total rebellion. When the AFA uses their star players as leverage to squeeze Infantino, he will receive the most brutal wake-up call of his entire career, a clear sign that his time at the top is up. But there is one more detail making this move devastatingly effective right now: the ticking clock. The Champions League is only a few weeks away. Powerhouses across Europe with Argentinians on their payrolls desperately need to know if their stars can take the pitch in the Champions League. They need to draw up their tactical blueprints. Managers must decide if they need to scramble for emergency replacements before the summer transfer window slams shut. They demand clarity, and UEFA is about to deliver a definitive answer in the next few hours. This pressure cooker urgency is exactly why UEFA timed this attack so ruthlessly, because it is no coincidence that UEFA is striking now, while these massive clubs are deep in preseason training, while the transfer window is active, leaving a tiny sliver of time to change things if Infantino acts fast. If UEFA had decided to strike in the dead of winter while the transfer window was closed, the Premier League giants would have been completely helpless. Their Argentinian stars would be banned from the Champions League, with absolutely no way for their teams to sign any replacements. The fallout would have been devastating and impossible to fix. Instead, UEFA struck right now, with the transfer market open, giving Infantino a clear window to react, to take actual action on the three massive scandals he piled up during and after the World Cup. But this window is not some act of mercy. It is a trap. Because if Infantino takes the bait and does exactly what UEFA demands, they get everything they wanted. They want FIFA to openly confess to massive irregularities during the World Cup, and to finally punish those guilty of blatant favoritism, to explain the controversial VAR videos in a way that is actually believable, and to hand out punishment for the Malvinas banner using the same strict rules they would apply to anyone else. Each of those moves would be a direct confession, an admission that Infantino completely mismanaged the World Cup. It would prove that the dark suspicions hanging over those 6 weeks of the tournament were entirely justified. It would prove the FIFA president used his immense power to favor one specific team on the grandest stage in the world. But what if Infantino does not back down? What if he refuses to bow to UEFA pressure, claiming that banning Argentinian players is unacceptable, and that European tournaments cannot be used as bargaining chips in a political war? If so, the English giants will carry out their threat. And without those Premier League teams, the Champions League loses its identity entirely. It becomes just another average tournament. Because giants like Liverpool, Manchester City, Arsenal, Chelsea, and Tottenham do not just decorate the tournament. They are the tournament. They are the ones packing stadiums across Europe and generating the massive cash flows that make the Champions League the wealthiest tournament on earth. Without them, the competition loses something no television deal could ever replace: Infantino, who desperately needs the Champions League to maintain its elite status, because the prestige of FIFA events depends heavily on the strength of European football, knows this better than anyone. He has only two options. He can either surrender and confess to everything, or fight back and watch the English clubs abandon the Champions League. Neither path offers him a future he can sustain for very long, and that is precisely the brutal trap UEFA planned with this move. There is simply no escape route for Infantino that does not end in the permanent destruction of his presidency. For days now, Infantino has been scrambling to control the damage. First, he released a statement backing away from the FIFA forward plan. Now, he is promising emergency meetings with various confederations over the coming weeks to map out the future. He is using the classic language of a politician, trying to persuade everyone that the proposal itself was the only issue, and that abandoning it fixes everything. But UEFA made their stance crystal clear in their fierce response. The proposal was never the real issue. That project was just the final straw, the last drop that overflowed a massive cup of grievances built up over months of tension. And pulling back that single plan does not make those grievances disappear. The cup is still overflowing. It is full of uninvestigated, blatant favoritism. It is full of crucial VAR footage that mysteriously vanished. Think of the silence over the illegal Malvinas banner and the total lack of response to the English clubs. It is the weight of a presidency that has generated more high-profile scandals lately than any other era in modern FIFA history. UEFA has Infantino backed into a corner, and they are turning the final screw. Banning Argentinian players from European tournaments is that final twist, because this aggressive move is about far more than just punishing one nation. It forces everyone to choose a side: the players, the AFA, and the European teams employing them. This drags in domestic leagues, key sponsors, and the massive TV networks that rely on a full-strength Champions League. Every single stakeholder is going to have to declare where they stand on Infantino. And when that wave of honesty hits, the overwhelming demands for his immediate resignation will grow too loud for even the FIFA president to ignore. He will not sweep this under the rug with PR statements, vague promises of dialogue, or the support of small federations he has already lost. Just this week, both CONCACAF and Asia completely abandoned him. Infantino has ruled FIFA since 2016, an entire decade in power. 10 long years during which he managed to build a unique legacy that no other president before him could ever replicate. The poorest soccer federations on earth worshipped him, simply because he flooded them with cash. Underdeveloped footballing nations that never had any influence suddenly felt like they finally had a real voice at the table. That was his core power base, and now that foundation is crumbling. Because the immense wealth he promised those smaller nations relied heavily on the controversial projects UEFA has now destroyed. Specifically, the FIFA Forward plan to sell off the World Cup to private billionaires. It was also a clever way to boost the funds Infantino handed out to smaller federations to secure their loyalty. Without that specific plan, the money simply does not flow the same way. And without that cash, his support crumbles. Infantino knows this better than anyone, and he is facing the darkest weeks of his entire presidency. Especially now with UEFA demanding to know exactly who started this massive crisis, and using the sanctions against Argentine players to turn up the heat. Meanwhile, English clubs are waiting to see if they should carry out their Champions League threat, while the Argentine Football Association keeps pushing hard. To make matters worse, CONCACAF and Asia just turned their backs on him this week. Then there is the one thing that carries ultimate weight in football politics: the total loss of his credibility. For years, Infantino sold himself as the man growing the game globally. Today, that golden reputation is in tatters. Now, he looks like a man who tried to sell off the World Cup behind the backs of his own confederations. Consider the fact that critical video evidence from the most controversial World Cup in history simply vanished without explanation. A man who clearly favored one specific team for 6 weeks and then refused to answer any questions about it. You do not recover from that with a press release or meetings, and certainly not with hollow promises or the slick diplomatic jargon that corporate presidents use when trying to escape a disaster they created themselves. If Infantino wants to save what little is left of his presidency, there is only one real way out, and it is the one thing UEFA chose not to write in their official statement. But make no mistake, everyone in global soccer understood exactly what they meant between the lines. Step down, resign, hand over the keys to FIFA to someone who can actually unite the confederations without carrying the heavy baggage of the 2026 World Cup. A leader who can sit down with UEFA without immediately being grilled about why those VR videos suddenly vanished. He needs to pitch new ideas without facing immediate suspicion. That is exactly what UEFA wants. And banning Argentine players from European competitions is the absolute loudest way to say it, without writing a single word on paper. Anyone in the soccer world who believed this massive war between UEFA and FIFA ended with the cancellation of the FIFA Forward Enterprise project will soon realize this conflict is far from over. In fact, the battle is just getting started, and Infantino is completely cornered. Argentine stars are now helpless hostages in a political war they never wanted, while English clubs watch, and the AF sits trapped in the middle. For 10 long years, the FIFA presidency has remained in the exact same hands. But now, for the first time, it seems his reign could collapse much sooner than anyone ever expected. The soccer world desperately needs a leader it can actually trust. This week proved that leader can no longer be Infantino.